George Zhu said, "Send someone in plain clothes tomorrow to talk to Zhang Hongba about the seriousness of the matter. Also, assign a few more plainclothes officers to protect Zhang Hongba around the clock." In the previous incidents, the perpetrator did not directly contact the victims but used chemical poisons. Therefore, it's crucial to warn Zhang Hongba to be careful with his diet and absolutely not to consume any delivered food. Moreover, the plainclothes officers should thoroughly inspect his living and working environments to prevent any potential dangers. If any suspicious individuals are spotted during the protection detail, they should be detained immediately. Besides Zhang Hongba, relatives from the Jiang and Li families who have previously had issues with the He family should also be monitored. As for manpower, your criminal investigation team will directly follow up on Zhang Hongba's case, while the security team and local police stations can handle the security work for the others. All right, I'll arrange it first thing tomorrow morning. Let's get back to the case. Besides that fat man, we don't have any clues about the identity of the other accomplice. Greg Wong sighed, "We can't find out." After the first time the fat man targeted Jiang Xiaobing on Anil Road, he came out alone. Jiang Xiaobing's body must have been transported by a vehicle to avoid being captured by surveillance cameras. But despite questioning the drivers of over 50 vehicles immediately, we got nothing. The second time, when Li Gang's family was killed, the surveillance captured the fat man leaving before the crime, clearly indicating that someone else was controlling the remote. George Zhu pondered. So, up to now, we don't even know whether the accomplice is male or female. Exactly. Including the initial murder of Jiang Xiaobing and the fake kidnapping case, we can't determine whether the voice on the phone was the murderer or the accomplice. The murderer is skilled in chemistry and came for revenge on behalf of the He family, proving a special relationship with Jasmine Gone. What could be the relationship between this accomplice and the murderer? Could they be a couple? We can't rule out the possibility of the accomplice being a woman, as the accomplice only did two things: moving the body and operating the remote control, both of which a woman could do. But if they are a couple, why would a wife help her husband commit crimes for another woman who has passed away? George Zhu said, "What if the murderer is a woman, and the fat man is just an accomplice? The wife had a deep friendship with Jasmine Gone, and the fat man helped his wife commit the murders." Greg Wong suddenly realized, no wonder we couldn't find any of the fat man's old classmates who fit the profile of having a criminal suspicion. If this is the answer, it makes sense. I'll check Jasmine Gone's female classmates tomorrow. George Zhu thought for a moment, then shook his head. My hypothesis might be a bit far-fetched. Don't let it disrupt your thinking. Female classmates, even if they were close back then, are just friends at most. And friendships between women are often not very strong. Well, even if they're strong, I really can't imagine a woman abandoning her own life to commit serious crimes for the sake of friendship. Boss, what's your opinion then? I haven't come up with any other reasonable explanations yet. Let's wait for the investigation results of Vincent Fan's case tomorrow. The next day at noon, Jacqueline reported to the two, "Boss, the investigation results of the Fan family case are out. The city's forensic toxicology lab extracted residues from the milk, proving it was indeed arsenic poisoning. Moreover, the amount of arsenic in the milk was very high, exceeding its solubility in water, with arsenic even present as solid sediment in the milk bottle. The forensic scientists suggested that the murderer added a large dose of arsenic considering milk's protective effect on the stomach lining, ensuring certain death. Additionally, extremely trace amounts of sulfur were detected. The staff conducted a control experiment with the same brand of milk, and no sulfur was found in the control group, indicating the sulfur was also added by the murderer. Greg Wong puzzled. What does that imply? Jacqueline said, the forensic scientist's opinion is that the arsenic used by the murderer was obtained through the oxidation of realgar, which contains sulfur. Hence, the extracted arsenic trioxide also contains trace amounts of sulfur. Greg Wong looked at George Zhu. The arsenic was refined by the murderer from realgar, which is readily available everywhere. Like before, we can't proceed with tracing the crime tool. George Zhu appeared somewhat helpless. In his decades of handling cases, he had encountered poisoning cases involving pesticides and rat poison, common in rural areas, but he had never personally seen a murderer use highly toxic substances like nicotine or hydrogen cyanide, which are not available on the market, especially since this murderer synthesized the poison from common substances. He pursed his lips, only saying, "What about other findings?" Jacqueline continued. We had a large team review surveillance footage overnight, reconstructing the murderer's crime process. On December 22nd at 6:05 a.m., shortly after the real milkman left the Dijingyuan community, less than 5 minutes later, the murderer entered the community on a gray electric scooter with a distinctive milk box at the back. Likely a fake, making the security guard naturally assume it was the milkman, so he wasn't stopped. According to later investigations, the murderer probably rode the electric scooter to the Fan family's door, used a screwdriver to remove the real milk box, then took out the fake milk box, attaching it to the wall with super glue. The lock of the milk box was left with a key, and a forged company notice was attached to the box. Afterwards, Vincent Fan and his wife took the milk and were poisoned after drinking it. Jacqueline added, "Additionally, we found that a week before the crime, the murderer had disguised himself as a milkman and entered the community multiple times without the security guard noticing. Those previous visits were probably for reconnaissance and testing the community's security environment." Greg Wood asked, "The murderer still didn't show up?" "That's right. From the back view of the person riding the bike during the reconnaissance, it was still that fat man, wearing a hat and mask, with hands in gloves. But on the day of the crime, due to the blizzard that started the day before and heavy snowfall that morning, the surveillance couldn't capture clear images. It vaguely appeared that the person's figure seemed slimmer." Greg Wong and George Zhu were both startled, marking the first time this accomplice appeared on surveillance. Jacqueline continued, "Still wearing a hat and mask, and with the weather conditions that day, plus the crime happening before dawn in dim light, it's impossible to determine the identity of this person." Greg Wong thought for a moment. "Send the video to my email. I'll take another look." "Anything else?" "That's about it. All detailed reports are in this file." "There's also another matter." Jacqueline looked troubled. Greg Wong hesitantly looked at him. "What?" "We received a message from the police station this morning. Vincent Fan's son and daughter, along with a group of relatives and friends, stormed into the He family's home early in the morning, smashing things and injuring people." "What?" Greg Wong and George Zhu exclaimed in shock. Greg Wong hurriedly asked, "How are the people?" "He Jian's mother was knocked unconscious and has been sent to the hospital. Jasmine Gon's 4-year-old son was also kicked unconscious in the chaos and is now in the hospital. I just asked. Both are currently not in life-threatening danger, but the child might have been traumatized. After waking up, he became silent, not crying or making noise, and not speaking a word." Greg Wong angrily clenched his teeth. How could Vincent Fan's children target the He family? Jacqueline hesitated. It's said that the police station told them that their parents were killed by a friend of Jasmine Gon, so they gathered a large group of people to go. "What about the police station? Didn't I specifically instruct before not to let anyone else trouble the He family?" Jacqueline awkwardly said, "The people who went included officers from their police station. Later a deputy chief found out, led others over, and managed to calm things down, sending people to the hospital. I just received this news. Damn it." Greg Wong couldn't help but curse. Captain Lin, "Immediately take the county bureau's people and arrest everyone involved in the morning's disturbance, including those from the police station." Captain Lin appeared troubled. "Boss, although Vincent Fan is dead, other relatives of the Fan family hold leadership positions. The morning's incident. Vincent Fan's siblings were also involved. This might be difficult to handle." Greg Wong angrily exhaled deeply, remaining silent. George Zhu thought for a moment. "I've also heard quite a bit about the Fan family these days. It seems the Fan family has a big influence in your county, right?" Greg Wong snorted coldly. The Fan family's deceased patriarch was the former county secretary. Each of his children holds official positions, known as a family of civil servants, 1 bureau, 3 directors. Including their spouses, children, and relatives and friends, many are leaders in the county and surrounding counties and cities, with connections at the provincial and municipal levels. In the county, there's nothing the Fan family can't do." George Zhu nodded and said, "When River killed Yi Jianxing, you couldn't do anything about it. Now, trying to arrest Vincent Fan's children over this morning's incident is indeed difficult." He paused for a moment, then suddenly said coldly, "However, this person must be arrested." Greg Wong and Jacqueline both looked up at George Zhu in surprise. "Our current priority is to prevent the next murder since we can't catch the murderer right now. We discussed yesterday that the murderer's targets fall into 2 categories, one of which is those who have troubled the He family. With this morning's incident, the murderer might soon find out, putting those people in danger. It's better to arrest them first, arrange for them to stay in a hotel, and then see what to do after some time." As for who will do the arresting, it's inconvenient for your county bureau to show up, but I have brought more than a dozen people from the provincial office, and the city bureau also sent a criminal investigation team this morning. Let the city bureau and provincial office people do the arresting this afternoon. If we encounter Vincent Fan's family, explaining the situation once should make them understand. After Jack Lin left, Greg Wong sat in his chair, lips tightly pursed. George Ju comforted him. All right, don't be angry about this anymore. I've encountered more of these situations than you have. The officialdom has always been about personal connections. In your inland counties and cities, there are many clan forces deeply rooted. In the coastal large counties and cities, what's important is to align with the right team, follow the real power leaders. In the end, it's all the same. You need to learn to adapt. Greg Wong nodded helplessly. I know, it's just that I can't get over it. George Ju glanced at him, didn't continue on the subject, and turned back to the case. Let's take a look at the surveillance video of Vincent Fan's incident this time. Greg Wong's attention returned to solving the case. He opened his email, and the two of them carefully watched all the surveillance footage several times. Afterward, he pondered for a long time and said, on the last day, December 22nd, when the incident occurred, the footage was too unclear, the lighting was poor, and there were snowflakes. But the silhouette of the cyclist and the fat man who scouted the place several times before seem a bit different. He looks thinner. From this perspective, the one who switched the milk boxes on the day of the incident wasn't the fat man, but his accomplice. George Ju's eyes lit up. There's a common point in the three cases. The accomplice played a key role. Greg Wong suddenly became excited. Exactly. Now it seems. Except for the first time when it's unclear who killed Jiang Xiaobing in the last two crimes, the fat man took care of all the preparatory work for the crime, such as scouting the scene, while the actual killing of the victims was done by the accomplice. In the second case at the Li family, the fat man left the residential area before Li Qiming's car entered. The guy who switched the milk boxes at Vincent Fan's house that day also didn't look like that fat man. Now there's a question. The fat man did so much work. Why didn't he directly commit the murder himself every time, but let that accomplice do it? You know, the fat man's preparatory work was the most difficult. He had to show his face under surveillance cameras, which was risky, but the actual killing was easy, just needed to operate a remote control once. And another time just needed to switch a milk box, both very easy tasks, yet he handed them over to another person. Greg Wong pondered for a long while, then slowly started nodding his head, and finally slapped his thigh. The only explanation is that the other person is the mastermind, and the fat man is the accessory. The real planner is not the fat man, but the accomplice. That is to say, the one who really wanted to avenge Jasmine Gone was not the fat man, but that accomplice. If the fat man was the mastermind, coming to avenge Jasmine Gone, then since he did all the preparatory work, there was no need to share the simple task of executing the murder with another person. There's only one explanation: that accomplice wanted to avenge Jasmine Gone, had a deep hatred with the victim, so that person wanted to personally carry out the final murder, to vent their anger. And that fat man was just assisting that person in committing the crime. George Ju pondered for a moment, but now there's a contradiction. If the fat man is the accessory, and the real avenger for Jasmine Gone is that accomplice, then the accomplice should have a closer relationship with Jasmine Gone. The accomplice must be one of the car owners on Anil Road, but you have investigated all these car owners. None of them have a chemical background, let alone being Jasmine Gone's classmate. The contradiction lies in the fact that the mastermind avenger, the accomplice, doesn't have a chemical background, certainly not her classmate. Whereas the crime-assisting fat man has a very professional chemical background, possibly being Jasmine Gone's classmate. The relationships between these characters are now very confusing. Greg Wong immediately fell into deep thought. If this contradiction holds, then there are endless possibilities for the investigation target. One is that the fat man is indeed Jasmine Gone's classmate, and the mastermind knew Jasmine Gone through the fat man, with the fat man providing professional assistance for this crime. Another possibility is that the mastermind is not Jasmine Gone's classmate, but someone with a very deep relationship with Jasmine Gone, and the fat man, as an assistant, studied chemical engineering, but is not Jasmine Gone's classmate. Perhaps a chemical engineering graduate from another school. Then the investigation can't even begin. George Ju frowned and said, what was originally a clear crime process, because it involves two people committing the crime together, has led our investigation into a confusing maze. If there was only one criminal, that fat man, then we could directly investigate Jasmine Gone's circle of classmates. Now with two people, who is the real avenger? Who is the accessory? There are two possibilities. The professional background of the mastermind also has two possibilities. Whether the accessory knew Jasmine gone or was simply helping the mastermind. There are also two possibilities. Multiply them together, and now there are 8 possibilities. In addition, the relationship between the mastermind and the accessory has more possibilities, friends, lovers, etc. The more we analyze this case, the more complicated it becomes. Greg Wong looked somewhat disheartened. If it's really like today's analysis, that the fat man is the accessory and not the mastermind, then the early investigation of Jasmine Gan's classmates was in vain. George Yu nodded in agreement. This time, the criminal's ability, crime details, and anti-investigation awareness are unprecedentedly strong. Every time they use chemical poison to kill people, they can do it without direct contact with the victims. The choice of poison is different for each crime. The first time using nicotine, with a small dose, quick effect, the victim didn't fully wake up before falling into a coma and then dying. The second time using hydrogen cyanide, because they chose a spray bottle device, liquid hydrogen cyanide was the best choice. Nicotine, due to the difficulty of purification, getting a bottle of nicotine is troublesome, so they directly synthesized hydrogen cyanide. The third time they used arsenic trioxide, which takes effect slowly, but once it works, it's impossible to save the victim, showing that the criminal also foresaw that Vincent Fan and his wife might not drink the milk at the same time. If they used a fast-acting poison, one person might not have drunk it yet, and see the other person in trouble. Naturally, it would be impossible to kill both. And in the crimes, the criminal never left key evidence, avoiding surveillance cameras outside the crime scene as much as possible, proving that the preliminary work of environmental survey was also very well done. Even when switching the milk box, they thought of waiting for the real milkman to just leave the residential area before entering to implement the plan. Such an opponent I have never heard of before. Greg Wong finished an entire cigarette, squinting his eyes. Now there's another doubt. How did the criminal know that Vincent Fan's family had ordered milk? The criminal knew when they scouted the residential area and saw the milk box at Vincent Fan's doorstep. Greg Wong shook his head. The criminal couldn't be sure which villa in the residential area was Vincent Fan's. We asked the security guards of the residential area. Tijing Garden has very strict security on normal days. Other than newspaper and milk delivery, other people need to undergo strict identity registration to enter the area. We checked the visitor records for nearly a month and temporarily didn't find any suspicious persons. And I carefully checked Vincent Fan's house. There's nothing outside the house that could indicate the identity of the homeowner. Vincent Fan's car should be recognized by many people, right? But the residential villas all have garages built on the side of the wall. From the outside of the villa looking in, you can't see what car is parked in the garage. We also asked Vincent Fan's children. Vincent Fan's car was always parked in the garage, not directly in the yard. Does anyone else know Vincent Fan's residence? We asked their police station. Many people know he lives in Tijing Garden, but which door and which household? Not many people in the same unit know. Leaders' private residences are always kept secret. Vincent Fan is no exception. Moreover, we checked Vincent Fan's car, didn't find any tracking devices. George Yu puzzled. Could it really have been leaked by the milkman? Greg Wong still shook his head. We strictly interrogated the milkman yesterday. His testimony had no flaws, and we asked his unit. He has been responsible for the milk delivery work in this area for several years. There's no possibility of involvement in the crime. At the same time, he also said he hadn't been in contact with other people recently, and no one asked him about the situation in Tijing Garden. George Ju closed his eyes wearily. It seems that only the murderer himself can answer this question. Greg Wong shook his head unwillingly, believing that any doubt in the case could potentially be a breakthrough in the investigation. With many unresolved doubts and possibilities in the case, which direction could be the breakthrough? He lay in his chair, frowning and staring, pondering hard. There must always be clues left behind by a crime. Yes, he needed to analyze the 3 cases from beginning to end again to determine the final direction of the investigation. Today at noon, Chase Chen heard people next to him at the restaurant downstairs talking about Vincent Fan's son and daughter returning to the county town. The first thing they did was to lead people to smash the He family's home, claiming that Vincent Fan's death was related to the He family and someone was avenging them. Another person said that the Fan family had a significant influence in Jean County, and no one dared to offend them. It was said that several key members of the Fan family had gone, bringing a group of people, not only smashing the He family's house but also sending the poor grandmother and grandson to the hospital. The child was only 4 or 5 years old, and it was unknown how they were now. Chase-chin took a deep breath, his face unchanged, and continued to finish his meal with his chopsticks. In the afternoon, he took a taxi and stopped 3 blocks away from the He family's home, walking forward as if nothing had happened. Passing by the He family's courtyard, he saw that half of the courtyard wall had collapsed, with furniture and appliances piled on the ground, the door gone, and all the windows upstairs and downstairs broken. 2 policemen were guarding outside the courtyard, and a few older people who were idle were whispering nearby. It seemed that what the 2 people said during lunch was true. He sighed silently, did not look towards the He family, and did not pause in his steps, leaving along the road opposite. Passing by the group of elderly people, he overheard one saying, the grandson was beaten up by them first, and then kicked unconscious. Is he okay now? Another replied, I don't know. No one from the He family dares to come forward. The He family's uncle came over in the morning but was pulled back by his wife before he arrived. Who dares to meddle in the Fan family's affairs? The person sighed softly. Indeed, it's terrible. It's said that someone avenged the He family, and that's why River, Li Gang, and Vincent Fan's families were all killed. Oh, that's a bit terrifying. Well, those people deserved it. Look at how the He family's son was taken to the police station and then sent back in an urn. How tragic. Chase-chin did not stay to listen further, walking away without stopping. All right, well done, even hitting her son. You act on the first day of the lunar month, and I'll act on the 15th. Let's see who dies first. Chase-chin's heart raced, and he quickly took out a pill and swallowed it, enduring the dizziness and continuing to walk. After several minutes, when the symptoms eased, he had walked several blocks away, hailed a taxi, and returned home. Upon arriving home, he immediately changed his coat, placing the crime tools into the inner pocket of the coat, then took out 2 pills to stabilize his nerves, pursed his lips, and left his residence. Zhang Hongba, I originally wanted to prepare more thoroughly before finding you, but what your Fan family did today has made it impossible for me to tolerate any longer. This time, he didn't need that friend to take action. He would send Zhang Hongba on his way himself. Chase-chin got into his car and drove to the street below Zhang Hongba's real estate company. There were a few cars parked sporadically on both sides of the street, and it was the afternoon, working hours, so there weren't many people on the street. He parked the car on the opposite side of the street. Although he was eager to act, even unable to bear it, he still told himself to remain calm, to plan thoroughly before acting to make the crime more perfect. This crime was very risky because this time he was planning to kill someone at close range. He took a deep breath, calmed his emotions, and looked towards the office building, needing to observe and plan, looking for the right opportunity. At that moment, he saw a black Santana parked not far from the office building, its engine running, and occasional puffs of white smoke coming from the exhaust pipe. Fortunately, it was winter. If it were summer, he might not have noticed the white smoke from the tailpipe. He squinted at the Santana, noticing a person in each of the front seats, one eating instant noodles and the other smoking with the window half open. Chase-chin watched for a few seconds, becoming suspicious, then got out of the car and walked into a nearby cafe, glancing at the Santana again and noticing that the 2 people did not look at him. Of course, from stopping the car to getting out, it hadn't been more than a minute, and all of Chase-chin's actions were very natural. He went to the cafe, chose a seat by the window, ordered drinks and snacks, and sat on the side of the sofa farther from the window, discreetly continuing to observe the Santana. After a long while, the 2 people never got out of the car but would light cigarettes from time to time, occasionally looking around. Of course, they couldn't see Chase-chin. About an hour later, close to dinner time, and more cars began to appear on the street. At that time, a black Honda parked next to the Santana. The window of the Honda rolled down, and the person inside spoke a few words to the 2 in the Santana. Then the Honda parked nearby, and the Santana drove away. There were also 2 people in the Honda who did not get out of the car. After parking, they looked around a few times, then, like the 2 before them, smoked and chatted occasionally, sometimes sneakily looking around. Of course, all of this was observed by Chase-chin from behind the glass in the corner of the sofa. All right, you all are good actors, acting very realistically. Being undercover is really a waste of talent. Waiter, check please. Chase-chin stood up and left, undercover officers taking turns watching Zhang Hongba, allowing this guy to live a few more days. Greg Wong thought all night, And now the biggest dilemma was that the identities, relationships between the two murderers, and their relationship with Jasmine Gone were still unknown. Initially, he was convinced that the fat man was Jasmine Gone's classmate, but this conclusion, which was inferred from probabilistic reasoning, was now shaky. Because at least in 2 crimes, the final act of murder was not carried out by the fat man, but by another accomplice whose identity, gender, age, and appearance were unknown. The final simple murder operation was carried out by this accomplice, proving that this accomplice was the real culprit seeking revenge for Jasmine Gone, and the fat man was likely an accomplice, coming from a chemical engineering background at another school. Therefore, searching for Jasmine Gone's old classmates based on the fat man's height yielded nothing. So, how could the case be investigated further at this point? The most useful clue now left in hand was a milk box. After confirmation from the milk company, this box was not from their company, meaning the box was obtained by the murderer through other means. Even if the murderer was a chemistry major and personally concocted the chemical poisons used in the crimes, Greg Wong did not believe that a murderer could make a finely printed metal box himself. Impossible, it must have been custom-made from a mold manufacturer. Every place has mold shops that can custom-make tools. Where did the murderer order this box? In Jean County? Possibly. But a smart murderer might go out of town to order. Regardless, it was definitely custom-made by the murderer, and the murderer could not have designed the murder plan long ago. It must have been ordered in the last month or 2. Having thought this through, Greg Wong came to the office early in the morning, immediately discussed with George Zhu, and ordered the county bureau to visit the industrial and commercial bureau to find all the mold processing factories in the county. Regardless of the size of the factory, someone had to personally visit each one to inquire if anyone had ordered this box. The reason for visiting factories was that although the business was done by mold shops ultimately had to find factories for processing. Firstly, there are many mold shops. Secondly, some are not registered with the industrial and commercial department, making them difficult to investigate. And thirdly, the murderer might have directly found a factory. As long as any factory confirmed they had made this milk box, then finding the mold shop that placed the order, and finally, the person who ordered it could be traced.